Here we are. But what kind of place is this? Doesn't matter, really. That moving truck I borrowed ran out of fuel, and I don't have any money for gas. And they don't do free refills at the service pumps. And I hear gas is a little expensive, maybe? Oh, and I also heard that greenhouse gas emissions accumulate in the Earth's atmosphere, irrevocably altering the climate and inevitably causing a species-level extinction event. Yikes! All of which is inconsequential given the fact that I don't even know how to drive a stick shift, really. That clutch is destroyed. I'm never gonna get the smell of bird rubber out of my nose. They are not gonna want that truck back. Anyway, here we are. I hope I ended up in a safe location. Reports of escalating violence targeting the LGBTQ community, combined with my obsessive consumption of true crime media, have led me to the conclusion that it's a dangerous world out there. Them's mean streets for a waifish trans in a microskirt. I should figure out where I am. Get a peek over this fence, find some landmarks, be certain I'm in a relatively safe community. Let's see. There's a giant croquet hoop next to a large, literarily significant flowing river, and I'm just to the east of that. I must be in Madison, Wisconsin. That's great. I love breakfast cereal. So now what? Where do we go from here? I need a place to stay. After all, it doesn't really make much sense calling your YouTube channel Aunt Tracy's Place when Aunt Tracy doesn't even have her own place. Not to mention, if I don't find a place to stay before nightfall, I'll be sleeping on the cold, hard ground. That'd be a shame, I mean it. Trouble, trouble, trouble. Maybe I could shag up with one of those men who are constantly popping into my DMs. At least a handful of them probably don't even live with their mothers. And all of them have more money than I do. I mean, it's mathematically impossible for them not to. Maybe I could even find myself a sugar daddy. Get a walk-in closet full of designer gowns, charge accounts to the finest dispensaries and boutiques in town, cars and servants, maybe even a lakeside country home. Sure, I'd just be a fetishized prop, an object of art serving as an extension of a man's ego, but at least I'd have security. I mean, how bad could it be? Okay, new plan. Maybe I should follow my own ambition. Set some goals, find a career, pay my own bills and my own rent. Give myself some kitchen appliances and some sensible shoes and maybe go to macrame classes. That sounds exhausting. Where do I even begin? I need to find some role models. Look to the lived experience of women in the past for guidance. Internalize the lessons they've learned and apply them to my own situation so I'm better prepared for the tribulations of a single gal living in a Midwestern city. All I have to do is open the door and step through. Hello! Welcome to Aunt Tracy's new place. I can't wait to show you around, tell you how I got here, how I found this place, let you know how Victor's adjusting to the new digs. Look, he actually has windows to the outside world. He sits there for hours, surveying the landscape like a mini Mufasa. He thinks he owns everything he sees. If you're new to the channel, welcome aboard! What I do here is I tell stories. Stories about things I've heard, things I've read, stuff I've witnessed. I take these stories and try to relate them to the everyday tribulations and outrageous debacles that I encounter as I walk through this world. And typically, darling, my life is a litany of shit in search of a fan. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back, Cotter. Consider this the first episode of Season 2, in which our heroine, Aunt Tracy, establishes herself in a new city with a new job and a new apartment. Think of it as the new adventures of an old queer. And never forget to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel. Today's tale is the story of a princess, a Viennese aristocrat, a Golden Age Hollywood legend and an esteemed inventor, heralded in the 1930s as the most beautiful girl in the world. The life of Hedy Lamarr was filled with unimaginable drama and intrigue. She escaped the rising tide of fascism in Europe, mesmerized audiences on the silver screen, enjoyed many lovers and numerous husbands, both consecutively and concurrently. And through it all, she managed to remain steadfastly in pursuit of her own destiny. Before getting any deeper into it, I want to acknowledge my sources. Hedy Lamarr, An Incredible Life, the biographical graphic novel written by William Waugh and illustrated by Sylvain Dorange. And Beautiful, The Life of Hedy Lamarr by Stephen Michael Shearer. In 1914, Vienna, Austria was known as the gayest city in all of Europe. And into this world was born Hedwig Kiesler, Hedy for short. Hedy was a pampered only child, raised in posh Viennese society by affluent parents. Her father, Emil, came from a Jewish family in West Ukraine. He was the manager of a leading bank in Vienna. Her mother, Gertrude, was a Jewish-born Hungarian girl who had converted to Catholicism and once held a promising career as a concert pianist, before leaving it all behind after becoming pregnant with Hedy. From birth, Hedy would want for very little, though her parents were seldom home in the evenings, out attending opera and theaters and the Vienna nightlife. But Hedy was surrounded by adults, namely a parlor maid and a cook and a nurse. So she wasn't exactly a latchkey kid. Now, this being early 20th century times, Gertrude would begin prepping her daughter for marriage even before she started school. Hedy enrolled in ballet and piano lessons and learned German, French, and Italian from her governess, Nicolette. Her father, Emile, fostered her inquisitive mind, spending hours patiently telling his daughter how the machinery of the world worked. From printing presses to streetcars, Emile took the time to teach his fascinated child all about whatever entered her curious little mind. Emile and Gertrude were concerned that spoiling their only daughter could cause her harm. They were particularly worried because, even at an early age, it was obvious that Hedy possessed uncanny beauty. Her mother insisted that the family never flatter her looks, and instead worked to keep her grounded, assigning her household chores such as caring for the family birdcage. They still spoiled her. You can't help yourself as a parent. Her father called her Princess Hedy. Her mother rewarded good behavior by taking her to a stage play, sparking a lifelong passion in Hedy for the theater. Hedy began reading at age 5. She would devour movie magazines and practice her dramatics by acting out fairy tales with her dolls on a little stage under her father's desk. Hey there! Have you subscribed to Aunt Tracy's YouTube channel yet? No, not me. I'm very particular about what channels I subscribe to. Well then, you shall perish! Ha ha! You know, violence is never the answer. Eat steel. The year was 1919. The Republic of Austria was established, and a steady rise in poverty, political strife, and anti-Semitism caused the Kieslers' anxiety about their daughter's future to grow. By the time Hedy was a teenager, she was studying art and design at the Dobling Academy in Vienna. Each day, her walk to school took her past the Sachka film studio, where classic silent pictures were filmed. Hedy was determined to become an actress, so she hatched a plan to get herself onto the studio lot. In Vienna, parents were required to sign absentee slips for every hour their child missed in school. One day in early 1930, Hedy asked her mother to write her an excuse from school for 1 hour so that she could run an errand. She did, and Hedy put a 0 after the 1 and gave it to her teacher. Hedy later recalled, the teacher said, "This is for 10 hours, 2 full days." And Hedy said, "Yeah, I know." That was no lie. Hedy did know. So that afternoon, after school, Hedy went to the Sachka film studios. Approaching the studio entrance, Hedy gathered her courage, took a deep breath, and then snuck onto the lot. She told the employee manager at the studio she wanted a job as a script girl. The man asked her, "Are you experienced, little girl?" Hedy confidently replied, "Yes, I have often watched script girls at work." Surprised by her remark, the manager laughed and said, "We'll give you a try." Hedy had just 2 short days, only 10 hours really to make good. But youth is always confident, and Hedy thought it was possible. People say that success requires quite a great deal of luck, and Hedy was very lucky that day. When Hedy reported for work at the film studio the following morning, her enthusiasm was rewarded with a bit part as an extra. Hedy was donned in a couture evening gown and seated at a table for a nightclub scene. Hedy was kept on as a script girl, eventually parlaying that job into on-screen film roles. And from there, she would go on to act in stage productions. Before much time had passed, and with her parents' financial support, Hedy made her way to Berlin to study at the prestigious and competitive Max Reinhardt School for Acting. Eventually, Hedy ended up following Max Reinhardt back to Vienna to take a small role in a Peter Lorre vehicle while continuing to get cast in Reinhardt's plays. One day, during the rehearsal of a cafe scene, Professor Reinhardt, a man not given to superlatives, turned to a group of reporters and succinctly proclaimed words that would go on to define and affect Hedy's career. "Hedy Keisler is the most beautiful girl in the world," Max said. Instantly, the reporters recorded Reinhardt's utterance and dispatched it to newspapers all across the world. This publicity helped Hedy land the part of the female lead in a production being filmed in Prague by a notable Czech director. That film, Ecstasy, would make Hedy an international star and define her screen image for decades. The plot of Ecstasy concerns a young woman, Eva, played by Hedy, who gets married off to a wealthy older man who is physically disinterested in his younger wife, never even consummating the marriage. So one afternoon, Eva hops on her little pony and rides to a secluded pond to take a refreshing dip of the skinny variety. That horse runs off with her clothes, and Adam, a hot and virile young road construction worker, spies the horse and gives chase, whereupon he discovers the nude Eva taking cover amongst the foliage. In the bushes. She was in the bushes. She was hiding in the bushes. This movie broke the telegraph. At its world premiere in Prague, it was immediately hailed a masterpiece. Hedy's parents, who had not yet seen the film, beamed with pride. Their little princess was a real movie star. Of course, after seeing their little princess running nude amongst the trees on the big screen, Hedy's father simply rose from his seat and walked out, with Hedy and her mother following behind. Hedy vowed to her disappointed parents that she would never make a film again. And a lot of folks with the same conservative taste as her parents disapproved of the movie. The Pope called the movie indecent. Ecstasy was denied presentation in the United States. And in Germany, their new chancellor, a man nobody likes, would have the movie banned, primarily because of the Jewish heritage of much of the cast and crew. But most of the uproar amongst the uptight surrounding the movie wasn't based in anti-Semitism, nor was it the on-screen nudity that caused the backlash. Ecstasy was not the first motion picture containing a nude scene. It was, however, the first to portray sexual intercourse. And it was this scene that caused the prudes to come unglued. What they found particularly objectionable was the portrayal of female ecstasy. Hedy had the unmitigated gall to portray a woman convincingly enjoying sex. Think of the children. The scene where Eva and Adam make love for the first time is just dripping with symbolism. Eva lays back on the bed, overcome by Adam's passion and charm. Her string of pearls break off and drop to the floor, and we move in for a close-up of her euphoric face as she's moved by deep waves of sexual fulfillment. It was reported in the press in 1966 that studio producer Joseph Auerbach actually ordered more than 25,000 feet of the film love scene cut and burned before the film was released, considering those scenes too sexy and sizzling. Back in Vienna, Hedy, dutifully living at home with her parents, took over the lead role on stage in a musical comedy operetta, Sissy, the Rose of Bavaria Land, based on the life of Empress Elizabeth of Austria, whose fairy tale life is the stuff of legend, and is something we'll definitely cover in a future video. Click the bell for notifications so you don't miss out. Now, it's true that Hedy's father was a big deal banker in Vienna, but the looming threat of Austria's annexation by Germany caused even prominent families to fear anti-Jewish persecution, and Emil began suffering recurring migraines. The stress was getting to him. While political events threatened the very existence of Vienna, Hedy's dressing room was under constant invasion by deliveries of flowers from admirers. One evening after a performance of Sissy, the ushers carried several flower displays down the aisle, delivering them to Hedy on stage, accompanied by a simple card signed Fritz Mandl. Fritz was suave and debonair, an irresistible figure in Viennese society. He was the third richest man in all of Austria. How did he become so wealthy? The old-fashioned way, through inheritance and war profiteering. Fritz owned a production plant that supplied weaponry to the increasingly hostile European nations. But to Hedy, Fritz was a determined suitor, showering her with gifts and flowers, leading Hedy to formally arrange for him to meet her parents. Emil strongly suggested that Hedy consider Fritz as a husband. Sure, all his money came from shady deals with fascist sympathizers, but he rode around in a chauffeured black limousine, owned a luxurious Viennese apartment, and a modest castle. Dude owned a castle. We're talking cooks, butlers, gardeners, an upstairs maid, a downstairs maid. Fritz was a man who knew what he wanted, and what he wanted was a beautiful young wife to elevate his career and his social status. He soon demanded that Hedy marry him and give up her career as an actress. After just 8 weeks of dating, they were married. Fritz was the sugariest of sugar daddies. Girl, you'll get tooth decay just hearing about the rocks Hedy got. Fritz bought Hedy luxurious furs, an extensive wardrobe, an 11-karat gold and diamond ring. He took her to Paris, and when they strolled past the display window at Cartier at Place Vendôme, the display window was filled with rubies, diamonds, emeralds, and pearls, all set in gold, silver, and platinum. Fritz bought her the complete display. Everything in the window, wrap it up, we're taking it home. Hedy was intoxicated by Fritz's wealth, and by the promise of a life of luxury, security, and leisure. But at what price? Hedy would soon find life as a trophy wife to be a stifling prison sentence. This is such an ingenious shot. No trans woman in the history of YouTube has ever been clever enough to think of recording in her bathtub. That's a factual statement. Do not even bother looking into that. I've dated a few people in my time who, it's fair to say, have had a level of financial security that we'll call living comfortably. No one who is independently wealthy, mind you, but keep in mind, sugar daddies can be a relative thing. When I date someone who owns their own home, their own car, their own sailboat, these are things beyond my grasp, things I'd never have access to on my own. It can lead to this weird dynamic, like a power imbalance maybe, and I don't think I'm the only one who feels it. I think the person I'm dating gets impacted by this too. They might think I'm only in it for the money, that I'm a trifling friend indeed. Perhaps they feel pressure to maintain their status. It is, after all, a lifestyle in which one could grow accustomed. Maybe they feel like, if they don't provide me with luxury, I'll find someone who can. I don't know what they're thinking really though. You'll have to ask one of them. You're bound to run into at least one person I've dated. Heaven knows I do. For my part in these relationships, I did feel like I owed them something. Not sex necessarily. It's not like I've ever been known to be stingy in that arena. But more like appreciation, validation, an expectation of appropriate behavior, whatever you consider that to be. A couple of people I dated said to me, as a compliment, that I was their trophy girlfriend. Red flag, narcissism. Think about how Fritz treated Hedy. Fritz may have showered Hedy with jewels and clothes, but none of it was for her really. He was decorating his trophy wife, so he could dazzle his guests at his fashy dinner parties. He treated Hedy like an ornament, a voiceless symbol of his success, expected to sit still, smile on cue, and look pretty. There's a ton of videos on YouTube telling me how I'm an empath and narcissists are irresistibly drawn to me and I to them. I watched a bunch of these videos and I've identified some patterns in my own behavior that get me into these toxic relationships. But the thing is, my personality traits are also survival instincts. They're ingrained, honey. And even when I recognize these tendencies and check myself, I don't always know how else I'm supposed to act. I haven't gotten any better at avoiding narcissists really, but I don't fall for their tricks anymore either. I can see all the warning signs. Like trying to move their relationship forward way too fast, kind of like Hedy's 8-week whirlwind engagement to Fritz. Or monopolizing my time, valuing their own time above all, but being dismissive when it comes to my time. Fritz was said to carry a solid gold stopwatch, and each minute of his time, and Hedy's, was tightly scheduled. Probably my favorite attribute of the narcissist is those little insults they pepper in everywhere, as a way to subjugate me, to put me in my place. One of my exes, I said something that even they had to admit was insightful, and the response was, you know, You really are smarter than you look. I see these warning signs. I'm gone. One of my exes, after I broke it off with them, they called me a couple weeks later. They wanted to make sure I was doing okay. That I wouldn't do anything desperate. Because of course I must be devastated to be denied their presence after having, what was that again? Oh yeah, dumped their conceited ass. Some of you out there may be saying, yeah, Tracy, I have a sugar daddy, and my life is fabuloso, wine and roses. If that's the case, good for you, darling. I support you and applaud you. Get yours, girl. Also, I have a Venmo. I have to recoup the cost of all these balloons somehow. We are living in a material world, and not all of us have the same avenues open on the path to excess. Some of us have a hard time being taken seriously in the business world, in a society that conflates femininity with frivolity, beauty with fatuousness, this voice with vacuousness. It's no wonder living in the 1930s that Hedy's parents thought a rich husband was the surest path to security for their daughter. Of course they thought chasing her dream to be an actress was folly, but Hedy was stubborn. She had her own ideas. I feel like in a healthy relationship, everyone involved should benefit from that relationship. Chances are pretty good that if I do take a partner, that person will make more money than I do. But that's not my fault. That's just because they get paid more than me. It's not like I don't work. I put in a lot of hours. Tying these balloons wasn't easy, you know. Being poor is the hardest job in America. I think the point I'm trying to make here is recording a scene in your bathtub is a completely original idea. If you see anybody else doing it, they're ripping me off. What is the deal with my outfit? It looks like I'm trying to land myself a sugar daddy, specifically Oliver Queen. Fritz treated Hedy like one of his possessions, demanding attention and companionship on his timetable, on his terms. His jealousy knew no bounds. Her position in his life was absolute. There were 7 keys to lock and unlock the doors at their apartment. Hedy wasn't given any of them. The keys were given to the staff to make sure that Hedy was kept safely there. He forbade Hedy to go swimming alone. She wasn't allowed to socialize unchaperoned or to be left to her own devices. Fritz hosted lavish dinner parties with no less than 30 guests at a meal, made up of royal dignitaries and industrialists, and once, the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini, who insisted on being seated next to Hedy. Fritz would preside at the head of the table, with Hedy seated quietly next to him, glitteringly gowned and bejeweled, and thoroughly bored by the table talk, though she listened to those conversations quite attentively. Remember, Fritz was an arm dealer, manufacturing shells and grenades and military aircraft. Conversations with cronies often turned to discussions of the various types of radio-controlled systems and the research being conducted by the Third Reich. None of the men at the table ever asked Hedy for her input. She just listened patiently and smiled politely, even as it became apparent to Hedy that Fritz was making arms deals with the Nazis. Hedy was terrified. Her husband was in a dangerous position as an honorary Aryan, a special status Joseph Goebbels created for Jewish people who served the Führer personally. That spring at dinner one evening, Mandel was entertaining a British colonel who was particularly attentive to Hedy and openly disdainful of the Nazis. Hedy thought, this guy might be cool. The colonel ran out of his brand of cigarettes and Fritz offered to fetch him some more out of the den. The moment Fritz was out of sight, Hedy pulled her chair close to the British colonel and said, "Help me, British colonel, you're my only hope. I'm a prisoner here. My husband has his servants surveilling me, and he grows crueler by the day. What hotel are you staying at?" The colonel gave Hedy the name of his hotel and vowed to help her somehow, someway. Fritz returned with the cigarettes, and Hedy acted like nothing happened, returning to her boudoir as her guests departed. As she's sitting there brushing her hair, Fritz knocked on the door and entered, carrying a record. When he placed it on the Victrola, Hedy was crushed to hear her own voice. "Help me, British colonel. You're my only hope." Motherfucker bugged the dining room. He had the whole house wired for sound. Fritz kissed Hedy on the forehead and informed her he'd be increasing her guard, as well as confining her to her suite. Hedy was over it. She had a very flagrant affair with a famous mountain climber. She started looking into roles in stage productions. Fritz forbade his wife from visiting the theater or even leaving the house. And then get this, He hired an architect to build an addition onto the Mandel hunting lodge with specific plans for a nursery. This couldn't happen. Hedy took her escape plan to the next level. Mandel was hosting yet another big deal dignitary for yet another fancy dinner. Hedy devised a ruse, presenting Fritz with an idea to impress their guests by gearing out in her costliest and flashiest bling. Fritz, who couldn't resist showing off, agrees, retrieving her gems from a safe only he had access to. When Hedy returned the jewels at the end of the evening, she maybe forgot to return the most expensive pieces, mailing a few of the jewels and some allowance money she'd managed to hoard away to a friend in Paris. She didn't have to wait long to spring her plan into action. Fritz had a hunting trip planned in the countryside. Hedy, enlisting the help of her trusted maid Laura, put on a servant's uniform as a disguise, grabbed her suitcase and passport, and made a break for it. Hedy and Laura drove to the train station, where Hedy would sit and wait for the Trans-Europe Express for an excruciating hour, all the while on the lookout for Fritz or one of his lieutenants. The train did arrive and shuttled Hedy to Paris. When she arrived at her hotel, she was greeted with a cable from Laura. Fritz was wise to the plan and en route to Paris to fetch Hedy back. Hedy didn't even unpack. She caught a cab, then a vessel, crossed the channel to Mariold. Fritz didn't follow her there. Maybe he'd had enough as well. He decided to return to Vienna and seek solace in his vast fortune. Too bad for Fritzy, the party was over. His National Socialist buddies no longer considered Fritz an honorary Aryan. They relieved him of his properties and assets in Germany, valued at over $60 million. His old pal Mussolini wouldn't even reply to his texts. In a desperate move, Mandel denied his Jewish heritage, claiming he was the product of his mother's affair with a Catholic bishop. This did not win him any favors, and he ended up settling in Argentina in 1940. It's almost as though, if you're a member of a marginalized community who manages, through fame and influence, to wind up in the good graces of white supremacists, it's almost like it's inevitable that they'll just stab you in the back once your usefulness to them runs its course. Of course, nobody today would be naive enough to let themselves get suckered into such a foreseeable predicament. So Hedy had learned through the grapevine that MGM studio mogul Louis B. Mayer was also in London. Mayer was on a talent hunt in Europe, signing Jewish artists to American contracts of a way of not only rescuing artists who might be threatened by Hitler, but also as a way of signing top-tier talent for himself at bargain basement prices, taking advantage of their desperation to escape persecution. Moving quickly, Hedy procured an agent in London who arranged for her to meet with Mayer, who tried to use the scandal surrounding Hedy's performance in Ecstasy to sign her to a lowball contract. "We want our stars to live clean lives," said Mayer. "I don't like what people would think about a girl who flits bare ass across screen." Mayer told Hedy if she would pay her own way to Hollywood, he could offer her a 6-month standard studio contract at $125 a week. Hedy told Mayer exactly what he could do with his cheap contract. She was an established star in Europe. She knew her own self-worth and was not about to be intimidated or bamboozled into what she considered an insulting offer. She walked out of her meeting with Mayer without signing a contract. But after meeting with her agent for about an hour, who was like, "Hedy, sweetie, the situation here in Europe is getting pretty dire. You might want to, flee while you still can." "You make a good point," says Hedy. "We better catch up to Louis B." Mayer was leaving the next day to catch a French superliner to America. Hedy's agent tried to get her a ticket on the ocean liner, but it was completely booked. But her agent had an idea. One of his other clients, a 14-year-old violinist prodigy, was returning to America on that voyage. Hedy could pose as that girl's nanny and use that ticket to board the ship. So Hedy grabbed everything she had remaining: her passport, a simple gray tailored suit, some streetwear, a designer gown, a pair of gloves, and a handbag with $900 in it. She had sold most of her jewels to cover the cost of the transatlantic fare. Aboard the good ship Normandy, it soon became obvious to Mayer that, if he didn't offer Hedy a contract, he'd be making a huge mistake. Her hypnotically captivating beauty was undeniable, as was the effect Hedy's presence on the ship was having on its male passengers. So Mayer offered Hedy a 7-year contract starting at $550 a week with options. The one caveat: she would need to learn proper English. Hedy had only studied 1 year of English back when she was 12 years old. Mayer sent Hedy to the ship's E-deck, where Dior and Chanel had boutiques. There, she could charge a new wardrobe to the studio, along with a matching set of expensive suitcases. There was just one other thing that Hedy would need before landing in America, a less German-sounding name. There are conflicting reports about how Hedy arrived at her new moniker. Meyer claimed he borrowed the last name of Barbara Lamarr, a gorgeous actress who died tragically in 1926 from tuberculosis and an alleged drug addiction. Hedy claimed she chose the last name from the French words La Mer, meaning the sea. Regardless of how her name came about, Hedwig Kiesler, rechristened Hedy Lamarr, was on her way to Hollywood to embark on a legendary acting career that would change her life forever. And it's here that we'll pick up the story in the next video. Darling, we haven't even scratched the surface. If you haven't already, please do like the video and subscribe to my channel. Leave me a little comment. Let me know what you think of me. I'm thinking of you. This vamping usually works to get me things IRL. Let's see if it translates to video. Oh my god, the blood. Who knew there'd be so much blood? Hello, operator? Could you put me through to Siri, please? Hi, Siri. Could you connect me to my mother? Yes, I'll hold. Hello, mother dear. It's your darling daughter, Aunt Tracy. I'm sitting in a bathtub full of black balloons. It's Saturday. Yes, I'm all settled into my new place. Moving in was pretty easy. I don't have any furniture. No, I'm paying for it myself. I got a new job. Well, you remember how you said I was underachieving working part-time in an adult toy store? And that I should apply myself, pound the pavement, and find a suitable career? Well, I put together a resume, and then put on a nice skirt and blazer combo, and marched right in and got a real job. With benefits. That's right. You're talking to the new store manager of the adult toy store. I knew you'd be proud, but wait, you haven't even heard the best part. The name of the store? It's the same as your name. She's speechless. Is that Dad I hear? Tell him the name of the store. What did he say? Tell him it's not a whorehouse. Yeah, I don't know if that's a crack at you or at me. But nicely done, Dad. 2 birds, 1 stone. What's that? In the video already? Getting a little Return of the King? Okay. Love you. Bye. That's the script I wrote. You're laying on my script. I need that. I need that for the video. Hey, so I have news to share. I got an apartment. Check it out. Pretty big, huh? Oh wait, and look. Windows. Oh, but there's more windows. So that was just one room. Room number 2, plenty more windows, and there's my front door. Oh, but what is this over here? A sunroom? Are you kidding me? Look at all these windows. All right, so I've shown you the front side of the apartment. Come on, let's look at the rest. That's right, there's rooms, plural rooms in this apartment. Kitchenette. Bedroom. Closets. There's a restroom. And that's pretty much it. That's the tour.